Has got some company in the good old retirement home. Shouting out Tom Brady, greatest of all time, no question, no debate. It's been an honor and a privilege. The newly retired group meets on the golf course every morning at 10 a.m. Drinks are on the new guy, so bring your wallet. That's good stuff right there. And as we are joined now by my good friend, Shalise Manza Young from Yahoo, one of the best columnists in the country. Jim Trotter, also one of the best columnists and reporters in the country, but your regular host on Brother from Another. He needs no introduction at this point. I need the introduction more than Jim Trotter does from NFL media. Jim, and Shalise, it's a full circle moment for us. Both of us were on the front row of those Patriot press conferences back in the day, in the early days of the dynasty. But Jim, historian that you are, I want to ask you something. I've never, and both of you really, but Jim, start with you. I've never felt comfortable with, and Michael and I have gone back and forth, Michael Holley and I have gone back and forth on this for a long time, with Tom Brady as greatest player in NFL history. Greatest quarterback, greatest player at the game's most important position. But I refuse to say that Tom Brady was a better football player than Jerry Rice, a better football player than Lawrence Taylor, a better football player than Reggie White, a better football player than Jim Brown, who I wasn't old enough to watch live, but you get what I'm saying. Is he the best player regardless of position in your mind? But or with me that you got to qualify it?
Well, it depends on what your definition of greatest player is. So how do you define it? Because you can take it any direction you want to take it. I would say he is the greatest football player I've ever seen simply because of his dominance at one position and the most important position on the field. Okay. Look, I'm a San Francisco native, born in San Francisco, and grew up watching the 49ers and Raiders, and said I would never say there was a quarterback greater than Joe Montana. And then Tom Brady came along, and I have to give Tom Brady his flowers. He is the greatest quarterback that I've ever seen. I think for me as well, watching him leave New England and then to see what he did in Tampa after he left, because there was always that debate. Is it Brady, is it Belichick? Is it Brady, is it Belichick? And I'd always said it's both. But then to see him go on to Tampa and do what he did there in that first season. So I wouldn't have an argument with anyone saying he's the greatest football player ever. It just depends on what your definition of player is.
Yeah, and Shalise, I don't mind him being anointed as the greatest player ever. Certainly got a strong argument for it. Nobody's more accomplished. It's just hard for me to say that he's better than somebody was at their job that either redefined the position like a Lawrence Taylor did, or whose records will never be touched like a Jerry Rice did. It's just hard for me to do that just given the specificity of those positions and how different their jobs were, Shalise.
Yeah, I think it's hard to compare. You know, it's a different skill set, but you're sort of maybe picking nits. I mean, when you think about the expectation that he had when he was chosen 199th overall, you think about he was the fourth quarterback on the depth chart at one point. Then he was a third quarterback, and what had to happen in order for him to get to play with the Drew Bledsoe injury, and then for him to take off the way he did. I think it's just really incredible. I think the unexpected nature of what we saw from him, you know, it really lends itself to the idea that he is the greatest ever, because he might have expected it once he was finally drafted, but nobody expected that, you know, we would be sitting here, you know, 23 years later and
quarter century later. Yeah, it's crazy.
You know, it's really incredible. It's weird to me, and I've said it a lot lately, is it almost feels like he's been so good for so long that we've almost lost sight of how incredible it all really was.
Yeah. No, that's well said. I mean, listen, it wasn't bagging groceries, but there's not a more incredible story in NFL history than the rise and sustained excellence of Tom Brady. And you're right, nobody has done it better, longer. Nobody's done their job better for a longer period of time than Tom Brady. Yes, Jim?
I'll say this to you, Mike. You were saying that you don't see anyone ever breaking Jerry Rice's records. And I would push back on that a little bit from this standpoint. When I see the way the rules are going in the NFL today and the way that they're opening up passing games and whatnot, I would not be shocked. I would be less shocked if somebody broke Jerry Rice's records as opposed to somebody doing what Tom Brady has done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you win 7 championships.
Yeah. Oh, forget the championships. Oh, the championship. Oh, that ain't happening again.
Right.
That ain't happening
right.
again. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And the other part, too.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was thinking of Jim Brown as well with what he did, played 9 seasons, had 8 rushing titles in 9 seasons, things like that. So there are some records that record I cannot see anyone breaking. But Jerry Rice's, I would not be shocked if someone did based on how the game is going.
No, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. The longevity is Brady's got that, on his side more than anybody. No, I was just gonna say how he reinvented himself. Shalise and I, we covered Tom Brady. Think about what he was in 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. What he then became, in the middle of his career, toward the end of his career. He evolved as best he could for somebody who could never take part in the RPOs and the option football, but he evolved with the times and with the spread out offenses and just the high flying game, because early in his career he wasn't that guy. Want to pivot to head coaching developments. All that trouble in Miami, and he's not going to team up with Sean Payton, as it turns out. Sean Payton's new quarterback is Russell Wilson. Now that Denver has hired Sean Payton, I, for one, Shalise, think that Denver got Sean Payton for a bargain. I think a first-round pick this year and a second-round pick next year and $17 to $20 million, whatever it is, that's cheap for what Sean Payton is bringing to the Denver Broncos organization, and that's credibility. Like, you want to talk about head coaches and opposite Joes, they usually go opposite Joe. There's no more opposite Joe than getting Nathaniel Hackett, then going from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton. That is quite the come-up, okay? And given what he should mean, if there's anything left in Russell Wilson, if anybody can pull it out, it's Sean Payton. So for an organization that needs stability, for the longest time they were looking for heir apparent to Peyton Manning. And before that it was heir apparent to John Elway. They needed a quarterback. They needed a head coach with stability and credibility and authority, maybe more than any other organization that's looking for a head coach, given what they invested in the quarterback position. To get Sean Payton, money well spent if you ask me. In other words, you're worth what somebody's willing to pay for you, Shalise.
100%. If that's what the Broncos wanted to give up, and he was the one, although there seemed like there were conflicting reports yesterday that D'Amico Ryans was really their first choice, and that's a lot to give up if at the end of the day Sean Payton was really your second choice. Let's not forget, too, just because I would love to shade the Miami Dolphins for this, is the Miami Dolphins also sacrificed a first-round pick for Sean Payton that they never got Sean. But right. It is what it is. This idea that, coaches step away, he took a year off, and then he comes back for this feeding frenzy. Sean Payton's a good coach. I'm not like the biggest Sean Payton fan, so it's hard for me to get really excited.
They look better when they go into television. You know that. They
all look better.
The record looks a lot better.
At least he only played it out for 1 year and didn't do the John Gruden, keep parlaying it into more and more money out of the broadcast contract or whatever.
Right.
But if he, like you said, it's credibility. He has the name. He has one Super Bowl to his resume. So it certainly, I assume Denver fans are happier, particularly after what happened with Nathaniel Hackett. But I don't know. I'm not all that. I guess I'm kind of lukewarm on it. I don't know how you feel, Jim.
Look, I am a Sean Payton fan, and I agree with Mike that I think that if any coach can bring something out of Russell Wilson, it's Sean. Think about this in New Orleans. When Drew Brees went down 1 year, they had to turn to Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0 under Sean. And I'll never forget, I was at the first game Teddy played as a starter then. And Sean came into the post-game press conference. Ironically enough, it was after they beat Seattle. And Sean seemed down, after a victory. And when I talked to him later about it, what he said was, I didn't do a good enough job adjusting my play calling to the player that I had taking snaps. And what that told me is that he was not one of these coaches who was going to say, you run my system or no system, or you don't play. And so he adjusted, and he adjusted to the things that Teddy did well. Go to the next year when Drew is down again and Taysom Hill has to come in. What does Sean do? He adjusts his offense to the things that Taysom Hill does well. And Taysom, I believe, ends up going either 3-1 or 4-1 as the starter during that stretch. So I believe that Sean will do the same thing with Russell Wilson, with whatever Russell Wilson has left. Russell was never a good fit with Nathaniel Hackett. Hackett is a timing offense. Russell is not a timing quarterback. And so I do believe that Sean Payton will get the most out of Russell Wilson, whatever is there. But I believe what Mike said is true, too. You needed credibility, and you needed someone who could build for the long term. And I believe that that's what Denver has. And let's not forget this. We can talk about him being in the broadcast booth, but that broadcast booth was not paying him what the new ownership in Denver is going to pay Sean Payton. So Sean can rest. He can rest well on his wallet as he goes forward.
Credibility and long term. That brings me to the Houston Texans. Credibility is not a phrase often associated with that franchise, especially what they've done with David Culley and Lovie Smith the last couple of years. But sometimes you're just blessed. And, they are blessed now with maybe the hottest coaching prospect. Sean Payton might have been the biggest, most established name. But to get DeMeco Ryans, who, from what I understand, was always going to be selective about whether or not he took a job. He was not going to, run to the first job that was there, open to him. He wanted to make sure that there was an infrastructure in place there where he could be successful and both on and off the field. For him to go home to Houston, it's like me and my wife, Jim, and I'm sure you can say the same. The Texans outkicked their coverage, getting their former second-round pick to come back, same as Shalise's husband did. Outkicked his coverage to get him to come back home and be the head coach of this organization. I mean, they couldn't ask for a bigger come-up than getting DeMeco Ryans to come from San Francisco. Got the 6-year deal. Hopefully they will stick with him much longer than they did the last two guys. But, I mean, you talk about incredible stories, Shalise. They could not have done better. We'll see what they end up doing at the quarterback position. But an organization that seemingly has been a laughingstock gets some serious credibility in, wait for it, a leader of men in DeMeco Ryans, who they know very well.
I think the biggest thing, like you said, is how long are they going to stick with him? I just really, really, really hope that they give him time to turn around. They're hard to trust,
aren't they?
They really are. And how many times have we seen it, particularly with Black coaches, that if it goes bad for him there, it's going to be tied to him and it's going to hurt him. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, that when I heard, when the reports came out that he was their number one pick, and that, they really wanted to bring him back to the franchise, that's all well and good. But, the last few years have shown that you just cannot trust. You can't trust the NFL in general, but you really can't trust the Houston Texans. And I just fear for him. I don't know DeMeco. I don't know anything really that much about him or anything like that other than what, has been reported. But I just fear for him that he doesn't become another, they give him 3 years because the Texans are what the Texans are. They don't really have a quarterback right now. We all know how critical a quarterback is to success in this league. And if he's not able to, have whatever they deem as the success, is he going to be branded with that? And it affects him long term. I mean, Raheem Morris is still waiting for another chance to become a head coach. And Josh McDaniels is on his third chance to be a head coach. They were rookie head coaches the same year. Josh was fired after a year and a half. Raheem was fired after 3, and Raheem still doesn't have another job. So, we all know that it's just the unfairness of it all. So I am wishing him the very, very, very best. I hope Nick Caserio can find a quarterback.
Ain't no way Nick getting another coach to fire, Jim. I mean, if it doesn't go well, Nick got to be the first one to go, right, Jim?
No, we're talking about Cal McNair as ownership. So I don't see him.
We're not talking logic here.
Yeah. But let me say this to you about D'Amico Ryans, Mike. You are absolutely right. And I know D'Amico, and we've talked over the last couple of weeks, and we've talked about Houston as well without divulging too much. And the one thing he was never going to do was simply take a job to have a job. And that goes back to last year with Minnesota, where he could have had that Viking job. And he pulled out after the first interview. Why? Because it didn't fit for him at that time, particularly with his family situation. And to me, that's a man of character to be able to say, you know what? My dream is to be an NFL head coach, but my family is more important than all of this. And so he stayed behind for another year in San Francisco, knowing that other opportunities would come along. Now, in terms of Houston, you know, again, without divulging too much, I said point blank to D'Amico, you got to be careful about this ownership and this front office group. And D'Amico said, I'm aware of everything. And from that standpoint, I don't know what the conversations were between him and the organization, but I can guarantee you that he has some assurances. And I would assume they were in writing. I'm making a big assumption here. Yeah. I would assume they were in writing that he is going to get the time to do it right. And look, if we're being honest here and we set aside ownership, which is a really big ask, I understand. But if we set aside ownership and we just look at the situation with the Houston Texans, it's a nice situation from this standpoint. You've got the number 2 pick in the draft, which means if you like these quarterbacks, you can go get one. You've got at least 11 draft picks, and I think you have the 4th most or 5th most dollars under the salary cap to do something. So
with no state tax,
Ryans
right?
is going.
Ain't nowhere to go but up.
He's going to have an opportunity to build this in the vision that he has for how to build a program, and he is an intelligent coach.
Oh my goodness,
intelligent man, and he is a leader of men. So
I'm so glad you said that, because black coaches. Black coaches like, oh, he's a leader of men, which is a compliment, and that's important as a head coach. He's a leader of men. You know, he relates to the players. This dude is a genius. This dude is a savant, a football savant, and not enough black coaches. You know, it's just, I guess it doesn't come organically to the conversation around black coaches. I talked about this last year with the Bieniemys of the world and the Leftwiches of the world. It's like they're X's and O's geniuses, strategic geniuses, all the same. Speaking of which, that leads me perfectly into the last topic I want to get to you guys, which is a whole show in and of itself. And that's something that is significant, but it's no longer novel. And it's becoming so normal until it's like, there are 2 black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl for the first time. But that milestone didn't register with me immediately for a couple of reasons. One, Patrick Mahomes is now a regular in the Super Bowl. This is his 3rd time in 4 years. They've been in 5 straight AFC Championship games. And Jalen Hurts' Philadelphia Eagles have been the best team in the league all year. And so when it was official that they were both in it, I was looking at it strictly from a football standpoint. It's like, they belong here. And that to me, and Shalise, you wrote a fantastic column on Yahoo as always today. And the line I wanted to point out was when you said, progress has not come easily or even quickly to the NFL, but this is a sign of progress. And the way it's so progressive for me is in the fact that for the first time, because Lamar Jackson's been an MVP, Steve McNair was a co-MVP, Cam Newton was an MVP. But for the first time that I can recall, the best quarterback in the NFL is a black quarterback. A lot of the better quarterbacks in the NFL are black quarterbacks. The game is being played in such a way that is often associated with black quarterbacks. In other words, even the white quarterbacks are playing the way that black quarterbacks were made to move to a different position because they played that way. For all those reasons, it feels like we're getting to a point where we no longer have to distinguish anymore between black and white. People always say, well, when are we going to get to a point where it's just quarterbacks? Which is we're waiting on to get to that point where it's head coach. When is it going to get to a point where it's just quarterbacks? Well, we might be at that point when there are so many black quarterbacks and those black quarterbacks are dominating. Now, so I don't see this Super Bowl, Shalise, as a watershed moment that's necessarily going to open doors, because that door is already so wide open. Are there going to be double standards? Is there going to be coded language around quarterbacks? Of course. It's black people. It's America. Ain't nothing changed that much. I'm not that naive. But the progress to me is where it's like, not only are these guys there, they belong there. Hell, with Jalen Hurts, the Eagles have built their entire offense to suit his skill set, as opposed to once upon a time, you had to fit your square peg of your talents into a white coach's round hole, Shalise.
No, and I think that seems like that's the progress, is more that coaches came around to the idea that, oh, my quarterback doesn't have to be a 6'4" white guy who, you know, is as mobile as the statue across the street in the park. You know, that being able to move, that being able to be a multiple threat, it helps when you're going up against defenses. If they don't know, if they can't be sure, well, the quarterback's never going to move, so we only have to account for, you know, the running backs and the receivers or whoever. There's another element now that you have to be aware of. You know, we saw it in the AFC Championship game. What is the signature play from the AFC Championship game? It was the one time that Patrick Mahomes needed to use his legs, and he did to great effect. And it wasn't too long ago that, you know, we just never saw those things. And I think, you know, we all know Jason Reed, and he wrote a book last year about this too. It's been fits and starts, you know, that there was for so long this idea that black men weren't smart enough to be quarterbacks, and also black men weren't good leaders and those sorts of things. And you had to get past that and then stop pigeonholing them that, well, yeah, we see that you're fast and we see that you played quarterback well in college, but you can't do that in the NFL. It's been a progress. And I do think, and it's interesting because, you know, Mahomes and Hurts, they're not really that similar in terms of quarterbacks. You know, for so long we thought black quarterbacks had to do a certain, you know, play a certain way, and they don't really play that way. And it's been an evolution. I think it's just been the time of coaches getting rid of those coaches who are so wedded to quarterbacks are just this way, and embracing the idea that success is success. And if it helps us get first downs and get to the end zone, let's embrace it and make it work for us. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be about, right?
Yeah. I think this evolution was inevitable. I mean, if we're being honest here, because look, what's the feeder system to the NFL? It's the college game. And the college game for years has been transitioning to an RPO system primarily. And so from that standpoint, just from a survival standpoint at the NFL level, coaches were going to have to adjust. And so I think that this matchup, or a matchup of these type quarterbacks, was inevitable. And look, we can talk about the timeline here, Mike, as Shalise talked about in terms of the starts and stops. You go back to, I got some numbers here. It was 1969 that Shaq Harris was the first African-American quarterback to start a season opener, right? The next year, or you go to 79, Doug Williams plays Vince Evans in week 5 of the season. That was the first time we had two black quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks, face off in a game. Then you go to, what was it? We had, I'm trying to look at my numbers here, 78 Dougs drafted in the first round, right? Over the next 20 drafts, there were only 2 black quarterbacks drafted in the first round after Doug was taken. So it's a slow process in terms of that and the mindset in the NFL changing. But in terms of this evolution to the quarterbacks who are playing today, the league had no choice but to change, or else it was not going to have people who could play the quarterback position based on the feeder system that was coming from the college game.
No, that's well said. And then speaking of coming from the college game, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, first 2 picks, and for that matter, Anthony Richardson, maybe the first 3 quarterbacks, or at least 3 of the first 4 could end up being black quarterbacks. Y'all are always first.
No, you know,
we appreciate y'all blessing the show.
You know that's not gonna happen.
They gonna prop up Will Levis? Okay.
Yeah, somebody will. Somebody will.
let me just dream. Let me dream that Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud gonna be first. We appreciate y'all, man. I love y'all. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.